All right. Hello, ELD friends. Craig Hooper with my little video response to the three videos that we watched. They were all great. I think maybe an overarching theme was things aren't always what we think they are, and good intentions maybe always don't always pay off or something. Um, Starting with the Gary Haugen deal, I mean, that was great. Just the poverty and violence and the connection, and it was just eye-opening, good reminder that some of the really great things that are happening in the sort of fight against poverty often forget or don't recognize that we have to do something with the violence associated with that poverty. I mean, it just really made me think about. I have a really good friend who his family has done some clean water like provided some wells in Africa. In fact, he took his family to Africa to see this village that they'd sort of saved, and it was really cool. I mean, it was an amazing experience for their family. I just can't wait to talk to him about this whole piece of things. Not to burst his bubble, but I'm just curious. I think it's so easy for the church or whomever to go, hey, we've got wells, and we moved the well closer to the village so people don't have to experience violence in their long walk to the well. But we haven't done anything about those criminals that have been just brutalizing these folks. So, just eye-opening, great reminder that when we deal with poverty, we have to deal with the violence associated with that poverty. I mean, that's part of of an act of compassion. Um, Similarly, with the Brian Stevenson, I mean, just a good reminder as a white male, things that I just don't have to think about, and I feel. It's just always important to be reminded that there are so many people of color who live in this world where they constantly have to be aware of um, this threat of violence and brutality, that I just don't have to think that way, and that's just not okay. When he talked about having to be invisible, or his grandmother talked about having to be invisible or insignificant in order to sort of survive, and when he talked about just wanting to tell kids, don't run, don't, even though your instinct is to run when the cops are threatening to blow your head off, don't do it, because that will just give them a reason. The quote when he had the gun pointed at his head as a 27-year-old, that he said, I feel like they needed to believe I was a threat so they could justify their anger, is crazy. I mean, I was recently with a friend who were driving in a car, and we were having a conversation about, I don't know, injustice, and he said, because you're in the car with me, I'm driving 75 on the interstate. If you weren't here, I'd be driving 70. And I'm like, I just was so shocked with that, because I'm like, I never have to think about that. And so it's a good reminder to me as a white male that most people in the world do have to, or a lot of people in the world do have to think about those things, and we need to change that. When white people are upset because of protests that are, that people feel like, oh, people are overreacting to this, incident that maybe was police brutality and maybe it wasn't. It's not overreacting. These are people who live with this fear and this burden of that's just always there, and I don't have to. It's just important for white people to understand that that's a real thing. So, great reminder. And then the Lecrae, the hip hop deal was awesome. I mean, great, just history of hip hop. I won't even go into all that, but just it's easy to see the hip hop culture as some of the negatives in that and the things that that seems to glorify. But he just gave a great picture of, okay, here's why that sort of makes sense, that that's what happened in urban centers. And he said hip hop was the language of a generation of men without fathers, and they had no choice really but to find their identity there. And interestingly, that it was the suburbs that made that profitable, and hip hop didn't start out as, it was more of a narrative of life, and it was sort of anti-drugs and anti-violence, but it changed as that was the only place for some of these young men and women to identify. But I love just the picture of that, and the art form that it is, and that it's a way for urban youth and urban men and to tell their stories. And but it can be a positive. It can be part of a bigger story of how we got here, and we can move forward from that. So all of these really good. I mean, these are things like this are always great reminders to me that life's not, everybody else doesn't experience life the same way I do as a privileged white male, and I just need to figure out what's my voice in that, and how do I help others just see those things and see that it's different for other people, and there are great injustices happening all the time that are easy for white males to overlook. So we keep moving on.